Football show presented by Mortgage Right. I'm your host, John Sarianides, and as always, I'm joined by my partner, Kevin Stone. Adam Kirchin is still somewhere on assignment. We haven't seen that guy in weeks, so I don't know how long he's on assignment, but it appears to be for a while. And I'm only kidding, of course. But Kevin, how are you this evening?
Doing good, man. How are you?
Doing all right. Can't complain. I mean, we're getting down the stretch here in October. Hard to believe that this is the last full week of October this week. And then, we got Halloween next week and we're heading into November. It's crazy how fast the fall flies by. Once you get past September, it blows by. And certainly that has been the case here so far in October. Before we do get started here, I do want to remind you that if you are currently looking to sell your home and move into your next home or purchase your first home, give our good friend Herb Devine a call, 781-254-2846. With over 27 years of experience, Herb has the know-how and the knowledge to help you get into the right program to make your next purchase or your first purchase. Looking to refinance? Well, Herb does a lot of refis, and interest rates are slowly but surely creeping down. So now might be a good time if you're interested in refinancing to reach out to Herb as well. Again, give him a call at 781-254-2846 or shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. All right, Kevin, obviously the Patriots yesterday once again let the masses down here in New England. Got off to a good start, 10-0 lead in the first quarter. Then they fall apart, getting outscored 32-6 the rest of the way in a 32-16 loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Look, I don't know how much we want to recap, but outside of Drake May's performance, I don't think there's much to talk about here. It was an abysmal performance by a football team that has now lost 6 in a row. And now people are starting to talk about them in rarefied air when it comes to futility. I've got a piece coming out tomorrow where I'm basically talking about the fact that they're starting to look like the 1990 Patriots, the Rod Rust Patriots, that went 1-15. I'll say this. You've been talking a lot about, in recent weeks, you've been talking a lot about the impending dissension in the room. And my response to that has always been, and I maintain it, that, hey, these guys are professionals. They can bitch, they can moan, they can say whatever they want, but at the end of the day, they're getting paid millions of dollars to play a game. Regardless of what's going on, they've got to be pros. But it's interesting now that we're starting to hear and see some of that dissension. Mayo was asked yesterday if the team is soft. Basically came out today on WEI and said, yes, they are soft, or that they're playing soft, I should say. He didn't say, yes, they are soft. He disputed that they're soft, but he said they're playing soft. You've got players yesterday openly talking about guys being more accountable. Jonathan Jones gives a speech after the game. It looks like things are starting to fall apart there. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, it's exactly what I've been worried about. Like you said, for a few weeks now. Yes, they're professionals, but look, we see what they deal with on a daily basis. Not allowed to talk about injuries, obviously, but we see how banged up some guys are, on a day-to-day basis. And you're putting your body on the line, literally, maybe not every day. You get Tuesdays off, but, you're not around your family. It's a full-time, year-round job. And if there's no, reason to show up every day, knowing you're going to be an embarrassing product on Sunday, it's human nature to be like, all right, well, why am I, busting my ass for this team? The scary thing is it's only October. Usually it's not till the holidays, Thanksgiving, guys want to be around their families more. They start to kind of, take that foot off the gas a little bit. It's bad already. And I've been saying it for weeks now. It's only going to get worse because there's no magic, trade or free agent signing that's coming down the pipe. This is who you are. This is your team for the next, 3 months? Call it until January. So it's a huge problem. Mayo, it feels like Mayo just wasn't ready for this or everything that it entails. I know he's been in the league for a long time now, but you have fires to put out as a head coach every single day. And he's creating more fires for himself too. So yeah, they're a mess. I don't like this weekend. I know we're going to talk about the Jets in a minute, but this is going to get worse. And you mentioned 1990. I was only 2 I don't remember it, but they're headed for the most losses in franchise history. Like if you look at their schedule, it's not great. This is going to be a long, long season the rest of the way.
Yeah, I don't think that they'll get there, though. I do think there's a couple of games here that they can win. Certainly, you got Tennessee coming up. You got Arizona. You don't know what's going on down the stretch the last 3 or 4 weeks of the season, depending on, where teams are on their schedule. If they're out of it, they could perhaps steal a win down the stretch. I mean, I don't see more than 3. Either way you look at it, if this team somehow finds a way to win 2 more games, I think that you almost have to take that if you're a Patriots fan because they're that bad right now. I mean, if it weren't for the Carolina Panthers, who might be in a worse situation, because at least the Patriots have their potential franchise quarterback. Carolina thought they had it in Bryce Young, but he ain't it. Outside of Carolina, you're probably the worst team in the league, if not the worst team in the league, if you look at it across the board objectively. They're in a tough spot. And I know a lot of people are going to say Mayo's not the guy, and a lot of people are going to say Elliott Wolf's to blame, and a lot of people are going to say if this were Bill Belichick, it's amazing how many people yesterday were running back to Belichick saying if this were Belichick, they wouldn't be this bad. Well, let's relax with that because they went 4-13 under Belichick last year. And look, I'll say this. The defense did play better last year, especially after they lost Judon and Gonzalez, and I get that. But that aside, they still went 4-13 and weren't competitive in a handful of games. They were in a lot of games too, and they won a couple down the stretch, but they were not a very good football team for the majority of last season. They're on that same trajectory this year. The only difference is they may only win 1 or 2 less games, which, if you do, probably more than likely solidifies the first or the second pick in the draft.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say it's ironic. He's now willing to talk about the team. He sure enjoyed himself today. I'm sure he loved every bit of yesterday. It's a little fraudulent for him to say what he did. Like you said, they still went 4-13, and he's a big reason, not the main reason, but a big reason why you have the lack of talent you have right now too. So
he's the biggest reason. He was in charge of everything. And look, I know this didn't get a lot of play last week when Bob Kraft went on the Breakfast Club and basically said that, yeah, I fired the guy, which I thought was weird. I mean, their little grudge is still obviously a thing, and they're still firing barbs back and forth, especially Kraft. Kraft has been firing barbs all offseason. I don't buy that he fired him. I think they sat down. I think he tried to salvage it. When he realized that Belichick wasn't willing to relinquish any of the control he had, they decided to move on. That being said, yes, it's going to be easy for Belichick now to sit there and comment on everything that's happening with the Patriots. And I'm sure that he probably, in its human nature, he'd probably take some joy in it. But the fact of the matter is, he's a big reason, to your point, for where this team is right now from a talent standpoint. People can sit here and point the finger at Elliott Wolf and say that last year's draft hasn't given them anything. Well, last year's draft is going to be defined by Drake May. I'm sorry, but it's not going to be defined. Jalen Polk's been bad. Caden Wallace is hurt. Yes, you want those guys, Javon Baker, you want those guys to be better. But when we think of the 2024 NFL draft and the New England Patriots, it's what happens with Drake May that ultimately defines that draft. Everything else is a bonus. Anything else you get out of that class. Yeah, you would love if Polk developed into a number 1 or number 2 receiver and became that piece that May can count on as this team moves forward. But it's all about what you do with Drake. And I think at the end of the day, this roster is devoid of talent because of Bill Belichick, especially on offense. So, yeah, he can sit there on one of his 5 gigs and talk about the Patriots and say what he wants to say. Everything is easier from the outside looking in. But the reality is the situation that this organization is in right now is partly due to him. And I think a lot of it is due to the Krafts. They have to start taking ownership of this because this is what they wanted. They wanted their team back. They handpicked Mayo. Now they have to live with this. And not for nothing, Kevin, people had to see this coming. I don't understand how people are so surprised at how bad this football team is. I said it from the beginning that they're, in essence, punting on this year, that it's a bridge year. This year was never going to matter. I don't know why people are surprised that they're 1-6 and have sucked so far.
Well, I know we've mentioned it before, but I don't think enough people talk about the fact that we now know he's been the next guy for 5 years. Like, and I was thinking about this yesterday during the game. Well, yes, it's still too early to say Mayo definitively isn't the guy, but I think by the day you're learning being a head coach in the league takes experience at the position. You probably would have been better off.
There's a lot of guys that are first-year head coaches that
No,
succeed,
I
man.
know. I know,
It's
but
not. I don't agree with that assessment. If he
so,
had a better situation, look, if the roster were better,
yeah,
if they had better talent, then I would agree with you that they've underachieved and his lack of experience
mhm.
hurts. And he has a lack of experience. I'm not arguing that. But there have been plenty of rookie head coaches that have had success and won. He's not
So
in a good situation. I'm not making excuses for the guy, but that's reality.
no, I hear you. I'm not even saying that that's it. I'm more saying they should have gone through an interview process just to get some other ideas and kind of know what else is out there at the very least.
Well, I
Maybe,
think we all have said that since he got
yeah.
hired in January,
So
that they should have gone through a process. I think we all universally agree with that. But
I think it's
hindsight's
glaring
always
now.
20/20, man.
No, I know. But I do think being walked into him for so long, now they're in a weird spot. The Crafts, I mean, in terms of what if they do go 1-16 and everybody wants Mayo out? They can't get rid of him after only a year because that's a terrible look on their part too. So they're in a
Well,
corner
right.
right now.
It's an admission of failure. It's an
Correct.
admission that you picked the wrong guy.
Yep.
And it'll reinforce what I think people universally believe, that it was all about Belichick and Brady.
Mhm.
And as much as you know, there are people out there that believe that Robert Kraft should get some of the credit for their success. He should get a fair amount of the credit. And then there are a lot of people that are like, what he idly stood by and allowed the greatest quarterback of all time and arguably the greatest coach of all time to do their thing. Anybody could have done that. And he doesn't deserve any credit. So it depends on who you talk to and what their school of thought is. But I do think at the end of the day, if by chance it did go 1-16, yeah, it's going to create an interesting dilemma. Do you cut your ties now and move on and start over, or do you give him another year plus and see if he's a guy, which is what I think they would do. I mean, again, you'd have to think they knew internally this was going to be a long year regardless. Ken Matthias joins us. He says, question for you, gents. What's your opinion on bad defense, on how bad the defense, I'm assuming he's saying, on how bad the defense has looked compared to a year ago that they were carrying the team back in 2023? Ken, thanks for joining us, man. I appreciate it. That's a great question.
You're missing a ton of talent. And it's not an excuse
I think it's
give up
more than that.
170. No, I know. It's not an excuse to give up 170 yards on the ground, but to compare them to last year, 3 key pieces are gone. So that's tough. It's not an excuse for where they're at. I'm just saying compared to last year, that's tough.
It is tough, no question. And you're playing without 3 of your 5 best defensive players in Barmore, Bentley, and Peppers. But last year, you played the majority of the season without Judon and Gonzalez.
True.
And my point is, while I agree with you that you have to take not having those guys into account, my counter to, well, you don't have those guys would be, but you didn't have 2 of your best defensive players last year, and you played at a pretty high level and finished as a top 15 defense. So the way I look at it, yes, you're missing 3 key pieces, but I also think fundamentally speaking, this defense is in a much different boat. They're not as well coached. And I've been harping on the fundamentals with this group for weeks now. Poor run fits, poor pursuit angles, poor communication. You saw all of that yesterday. You saw all of it. And to your point, Kevin, they gave up 171 yards rushing, predominantly to Tank Bigsby, who's a nice little back, and he leads the NFL in yards per carry. But the bottom line is that Jacksonville team was looking for any excuse to tap out heading into this game, and you let them off the hook. This was the game where they could have potentially, I don't want to say turned their season around, but certainly got on a more competitive track. And it didn't happen because, and make no mistake about it, Jacksonville's a talented team that has underachieved. That's a pretty good roster. They've underachieved. But if you're a Patriots fan, you are pointing to this game and saying this could be Drake May's breakout game. They're the worst secondary in the league statistically. They only have 1 pick. They've given up 14 touchdown passes on the season. This is the week he breaks through, and he doesn't. I mean, he had a good performance. Don't get me wrong. He's not the problem, but you didn't win. That's my point, because yes, while he had a solid performance, if he played slightly better, I suppose, you might have had a better shot. But the bottom line is this isn't on Drake May. Drake May played well enough to win yesterday. This speaks to how bad this roster is. And I think now the conversation has to pivot. We can't just talk about offensive line playing receiver play going into next offseason. This team has more holes than that. You've got holes at linebacker. You're a corner short. You're not that good at safety. You lack a pass rushing presence. I mean, they trade Judon to Atlanta. They haven't even come close to replacing him. They have to pressure more to get some of that production back. You need an edge pass rusher. This team has a lot of needs. It's way more than offensive line and wide receiver.
Yeah, and just before we move on to the Jets, maybe the most alarming part about their lack of tackling and terrible run defense. Your head coach was one of the best linebackers in franchise history, and your linebackers coach was arguably the best linebacker in history in Donta Hightower. So, how is that possible from a coaching standpoint? Like, how are they this bad at tackling, specifically the linebackers?
Well, but keep one thing in mind: it doesn't matter what Hightower and Mayo were as players. I mean, that's not going to make. But it's more about what they. I get your point. I mean, they should. You're implying that because they were good players and they were good tacklers, they should be good coaches. That's not always the case. And I'm not saying they're bad coaches. All I'm simply saying is just because they were good players doesn't mean that their players are going to be good by osmosis. It's not just going to happen.
So I guess what I'm saying, I guess I'm more so saying it's surprising it's not translating into coaching for them yet.
But again, I think this goes back to my talent point. I'm not defending them or making excuses for them, but I'm just not sure the talent is there.
Oh, no,
and
I think
that's the bigger issue here. Yeah. And again, they benched Raekwon McMillan yesterday. They started Christian Ellis over him. Mm-hmm. Jelani Tavai he's looking like a guy who needs to have someone next to him that gets more attention in blocking schemes and allows him to play free. He's more of a focal point now in terms of blocking schemes, and he's not as effective. So, yeah, I mean, look, we can sit here and talk about, well, Mayo was a great player at linebacker and Hightower was a great player. They should be great players. No, it doesn't work that way. I mean, it's all about the quality of the player at the end of the day. Yes, coaching matters. Yes, they got to do a better job coaching these guys. No doubt about that. But I do think the quality of the player matters here. Ken checks back in. I understand they're missing much talent, and Gonzalez was giving up big plays to Brian Thomas Jr. yesterday. What does DeMarcus Covington and Mayo need to do to help the defense out and get better, excluding the talent part, using the guys they have? Well, I mean, that's, again, thanks for checking in, Kevin. It's a great question.
At this point, it's on the players, right?
Yeah, but you can't say that publicly. You can't say, well, the players need to be better because no, look, it's going to start with the coaches. They've got to do a better job. And then it starts with the players. The coaching staff has to do a better job here. The bottom line is they're not doing a good enough job of teaching the fundamentals. That's abundantly obvious. And they're not doing a good job in terms of scheme. They're not putting these guys in position to maximize whatever talent they have. So it's got to start with the coaching. They've got to look in the mirror. They got to self-scout. They got to see what they're doing. And they got to figure out a way to turn this thing around. Now, unfortunately for them, they have a late bye. So it's not like you have a bye in the next couple of weeks where you can really, really hone in on your self-scouting and try to go back and watch all your games and figure out what you need to do better. They're not going to have that luxury. They're on to the Jets. So it starts there. I think the coaching needs to be better. I think they need to be better at practice with the way they're teaching the fundamentals and the way that they're teaching these guys to play within the scheme. And then I think you have to look at the scheme and what are they calling? What is Covington calling? Do they need to start looking into doing some different things, some different fronts, some different coverages, maybe paring back on things? Maybe they're running too much. There's a lot of questions there that I think need to be answered, but it starts with coaching. Mayo and this staff need to be better. And until that changes, you're not going to see an improvement from the players. Now, again, like you said earlier, Kevin, this is who you are. This is who you're playing with the rest of this season for the next 10 weeks. So you really can't – you could trade guys, but you're not going to get players in return that can really impact the season. This is who you're rolling with. It starts with the coaching. That needs to be better.
Yeah, look, at this point, the other thing that's interesting, trade deadline's in what, 2 weeks? They might start selling some pieces, and then you're really going to be talent deficient. I'm not sure there's a ton of guys out there that would draw interest, but there's some. Um,
There's
I,
some.
yeah, that's not a ton, but
Yeah, I
I'd be
think Bourne
curious.
will generate interest. With San
Um,
Francisco's receiver injuries, they may
so
end up
what?
being interested in a reunion.
So you desperately need, for lack of a better term, an adult in the room right now. What about Jacoby
What about Jacoby?
for a team looking for um, maybe just a veteran presence? Could you get anything for him?
I don't think they would trade him. I think
Yeah,
that
it's what,
they're.
I don't know if you
First of
can.
all, I mean, I think at the most you probably get a seventh round pick for him.
Yeah.
You may end up getting a sixth if you give him up in a seventh, but that's about all you're going to get. If we're talking about potential trade targets here, I think Tyquan Thornton's name is going to come up. It has come up. I think he's a
Oh yeah.
potential. He's a potential trade piece. I think Josh Uche is a potential trade piece. Austin Hooper is a potential trade piece.
City
Those are the
Stones?
guys that who
City?
possibly,
Yeah.
but those are the guys that you're looking to move. And realistically, maybe Kendrick Bourne, if a team like San Francisco, they know Bourne, they're familiar with them, they're willing to overpay to get him there to help their receiver core, possibly something like that. But that's about it. You're not going to, I don't see City So being traded because you're not going to trade an offensive lineman off the roster right now, given the situation they are in up front. You don't really have that depth along the defensive line to possibly move a guy. So I think that the top trade names you're going to keep hearing are Thornton, Uche, like I said, possibly an Austin Hooper. Those are guys that can afford to move on from. They haven't exactly produced at a high level and they have some value, but you're not going to get a great return for any of those guys. You're going to be taking 50 cents on the dollar for them. And unless you're just doing it to accumulate extra picks in the next 2 years so that you have some flexibility to move around on the board on draft weekend, that's about all you're going to get for them. No team's going to trade you a player back. And they're not good enough or have enough value right now to fetch you anything more than a day 3 pick, probably a late day 3 pick. Jets, real quick, I have to ask, any shot this week, in your opinion? Do they have any shot? Jets are 2-5. They're coming in here limping. They blew a 15-6 lead last night and ended up getting blown out by the Steelers 37-15. Do they have any shot of beating the Jets? A Jets team that is all in on this season and is desperate.
No, you are now the get right game for teams that need to get right. You just mentioned it. They still have Super Bowl aspirations. They're what, 2-5? I think
Yeah.
you might have just said it because I completely missed that. But no, God no. The Jets absolutely need this game. Look, the offense hasn't looked great for them. It's Aaron Rodgers, it's Brees Hall, it's Devontae Adams now. They're going to be a problem for this defense on Sunday. The weather's not going to be an issue, anything like that. So I'm expecting them to roll over the Patriots. Now, do I think it might be competitive for a half and Drake May looks good here and there? Sure, but this is a team that just smoked you 3 weeks ago and desperately need a win. Not to mention just all the past history. Trying to avenge is the wrong word, but after all the losing against New England, they're going to take any pleasure they can in dancing on the grave. So, no, I'm expecting the Jets to roll in here and win comfortably. I am curious to see how many Jets fans are in the building too.
What is Kevin Stone's AccuWeather forecast for Sunday?
Well, I'm more so many. You don't have to worry about it. But for as I know, it's going to be beautiful.
It's supposed to be in the mid 50s and sunny. So, yes,
Beautiful.
it's a great day for the Jets to get right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting because you've talked a lot about this, about, how many empty seats are we going to start seeing? And I've only poo-pooed it because I don't think that can be their focus. It can be our focus,
Yeah.
right? But are we at a point now where you're going to start going on StubHub and all these ticket sites and seeing how many tickets are available and what people are asking for?
I mean, it's an interesting story in my opinion. So yeah, I mean, I know it's Sophie Weller, friend of the show. She does it every Sunday now. She's been doing it since the opener, I think. So, but yeah, look. It was funny at one point. Christmas Eve a couple years ago against Cincy. I think they were $3. that day. It was a freezing cold day.
Christmas Eve,
But
right, and it was like 12 degrees.
yeah, but now it's more just about how far they've fallen and how quickly. So, will I do it, all the time right now? No, but I do find it interesting on game day to see where they're at because, we talked, like you said, we talked about it. When the weather starts getting colder, who is going to freeze their ass off to watch this team? Those tickets are now the hand-me-downs. And John, you've been a season ticket holder. Christmas, New Year's. Those are the games you get as Christmas gifts. Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So
I think a
those
lot
late,
of people are going to be getting Christmas gifts
yeah,
for
yeah.
those last
So
couple of games. Yep.
that's what I mean. Like, it's gonna on the field's gonna be ugly. Off the field might be much, much worse.
Yeah, it's almost like you want it to be ugly. That's the sense I'm getting talking to you. You do
No,
like chaos.
I do love chaos. It's good content.
I hate chaos. By the way, I like being the hero in all this. I don't want chaos. I like to destroy agents of chaos. That's why Batman's my favorite superhero. He destroys agents of chaos. He
I like
kicks
to
their
think I like to think of myself as Butters, Professor Chaos. So
Ken checks back in. Thanks again, Ken. Appreciate you, man. So, Kevin, it's going to be a blowout prediction 30-10 type of game. Can May stay consistent with his two TDs plus performance? I don't see 30-10. I think this Jets offense is sputtering.
yeah.
I could see this. I could see the Patriots. That defense on paper is pretty good, but they got yoked last night. So I could see them being more competitive than people think, but I could see a 28-17 kind of game. But yeah, I don't see them winning.
So it sounds sort of too football cliche, but do they man up? You know what I mean? Like, what team do we see
Well,
show
they're
up on
getting paid.
Sunday?
They better man up if they
No,
want those checks to keep clearing. They got to man up.
no,
And look, him
I
coming
agree.
out today, and acknowledging that they're playing soft, he's got to realize that's an indictment on him. Your
Yeah,
team, especially in a sport like football, because unlike these other sports where so much of the success of the team is dependent on the individual athlete and their skill set, in football, your team, more so than any other sport as a coach, your team plays to your identity as a person. And I don't want to make it more than it is. But if you're a tough guy, if you're a prick, if you demand, they're going to play that way. They're going to perform that way. If you have a certain philosophy that you believe in, that you adhere to, they're going to play to that philosophy. It's not like baseball where Shohei Ohtani can go out there or Aaron Judge and dominate a game. It's not like basketball where LeBron James can dominate a game, or hockey where a goalie can steal a game or a series. Football is a different deal now. Your team takes on your personality. And, it's interesting because Doug Kyde wrote about this in the Herald today, and I think it's an interesting point. And I was almost envious of Doug, and Doug's great. He's a pro's pro. But I was envious of Doug that I didn't think of this, but he hearkened back to the press conference. If you remember, Mayo was talking about, that he basically mentioned not being a hard ass, and it was almost perceived as a shot to Belichick that he's not going to be a hard ass, that he's going to be more open, and that he's going to treat people like human beings. And now all of a sudden he says that his team is playing soft. And I think the whole point of Kyde's article was, well, how is not being a hard ass working for you these days? It's not working very well. The hard ass won 6 Super Bowls and became arguably the greatest coach of all time. You're 1-6, being good to human beings.
so it's interesting. Look, he
And
he
by
talked
the
about
way, he should be good to human beings, regardless of what their record is. But I digress.
no, I agree, but this goes back to what I said earlier in terms of not being prepared for this part of it, the talking part. Because now he's saying this morning, he likes guys going to the media, and he basically said using us as an avenue. How is that going to work out if you keep losing games? Like, if you're allowing guys, no. So if you're allowing guys to not only criticize you and the staff, but other teammates publicly and get away with it, well, now it's just a complete shit show. So again, this goes back to
Poop
he
show. Let's
wasn't
use
ready.
poop.
Sure. He wasn't ready for everything that this entailed. Is he a good X and O guy? We don't know. Doesn't seem like it yet, but just the other side of head coaching. Like John, when you were coaching Norwood, you only had to deal with me, but it was still media. You still had to say the right things and put a good message out there. He's not doing any of that right now, let alone what's going on inside the locker room behind
I'm
closed
not a good
doors.
example, though. And I'm being
No,
serious
of
when I
course.
say this.
I
No,
know
the
what
only
you mean.
reason I say this is my problem was I was the opposite of him in that I remember my first year as head coach, we lost 20-19 to Needham. And I was asked by, I'm assuming it was someone from the Metro West.
Probably me.
My thought, no, it wasn't you. I remember the reporter vividly, but he asked me, what happened? How did we end up losing a game we could have won? And I said, simple. Our kicker let it run down his leg and we didn't tackle a soul, and that's why we lost. And so that was me. And then I get called into the AD's office to answer to that. And why are you talking like that to the media? We lose 7-0 to Milford, and the reporter asks me what happened. I said, well, you watched the game. What do you think happened? We lost 7-0. We had the ball inside the 5 3 times and couldn't punch it in. So that's what happened. Right? So for me, it was never, I was the opposite of him. And I'm sure there are people out there that are like, yeah, we know you're a fat blowhard, whatever. But I mean, I was the opposite. I wore it on my sleeve. I was never going to be polished with the media, which is amazing that I've been doing radio for over 20 years and I'm in the media now. But that was never me. I wore it on my sleeve. I didn't care. If we didn't play well, I was going to say it. I wasn't going to name the kids individually. But I was going to say it. I remember my first year, we had to suspend a bunch of players after the Walpole game. And I got asked about that. We were playing Brookline at Parsons Field. And my quarterback was asked to speak on it by a reporter that shall remain nameless. And I went over and I said, he's not talking to you about that. You could ask him about the game. You could ask him about his performance today. But we are not talking about player suspensions from last week. And I looked right at my quarterback and I said, you are not going to talk about that. You're going to praise your teammates. You're going to talk about your performance. And then you're going to get on the bus because it's 8:30 on a Sunday night. I need to get you guys home. I go, and I pointed at him and I said, and that's what you're going to write about. And he didn't like that. And it's like, well, why are you asking a kid to talk about his teammates being suspended? So my point is, everybody's got their own unique way in dealing with the media. I also enjoyed dealing with the media. I enjoyed dealing with you. Heck, I remember one time, my last year, you wrote a piece where you questioned the play calling, and I don't know if you remember this or not. You came to practice the week of the Dedham game. You were sitting in the stands, and I called you down and said, I don't know if you remember. I said, when did you become Bill Walsh? And we talked about it, but I respected the fact that you didn't shy away from it. You came down, we talked about it, we addressed it, and I respected that because I'm like, you know what? He's manning up and he's not going to take my crap either. But he's different. He's a different dude. So I think the way you deal with the media as a head coach at any level, in some ways is a reflection of you, but in some ways it's also how you want to address things. I'm a firm believer that as a head coach in any sport, you should use the media to send a message to your players that, hey, we're playing well. You should applaud them. You should praise them. If you're not playing well, you shouldn't call them out individually, but you should use it as a platform to let your team know that, hey, we need to cut the crap and start playing better because things are not going well, and we're all going to take the fall here eventually at some point.
So you're right. It probably wasn't a great example, and I vaguely remember that too. I remember being a freezing cold day with that practice, but
yeah, it was. And I called you down. You were sitting in the top stands, and I said,
"Yeah, freezing my ass off."
Bill Walsh? Why are you questioning the play calling? Your job's not to question the play calling. Your job's to report on the game.
And funny enough, neither one of us were employed so shortly thereafter. So it is what it is. But no, my overall point, though, again, for me, it just goes back to what we talked about starting in camp. You can't be their best friend, and he wanted to be. Now it's biting him in the ass, both on and off the field.
But you know what, though? Do you really think it said he wanted to be their friend? Or do you think it was more, I want to relate to them as a former player who understands their plight and what they're going through? I want to relate to them. I want to connect with them. Remember, a big thing with this generation now is connectivity and connecting with them at their level. Do you think that maybe he went too hard on that and not enough on being a prick?
So I think it's a little bit of both. And I only say that because he's doing like podcast with his players. Like, is that relating or is that, doing a buddy a favor? You know what I mean?
I think that's trying to relate. I think that's a respect thing. I think he's trying to relate. I think he's trying to connect with his players in another way. It's a pretty prominent way now. Everybody's got a podcast.
Right.
So I don't think he's doing it because he was buddy with Godshaw. I think he genuinely did it because he wanted to do one of his veteran leaders on the team a solid. And he also wanted to use it as a platform to promote the Patriots and his philosophy. I don't think that he was doing it just to do it as a favor.
Fair.
But even then, you still mentioned, earlier we talked about Kraft coming out and saying you fired Belichick. You just said we weren't employed shortly after that. Even when I left my head coaching job, it was a mutual decision to part ways, but they had to try to spin it as if they moved on. And I feel that whether it's owners or ADs, they always want to have the last word in the upper hand. But the reality is he didn't fire Bill Belichick, okay? Bill Belichick wouldn't agree to what he wanted, and he moved on. When I look at my departure from where I was a head coach, that's exactly what it was. I said, these things have to change. If they don't change, I don't want to be here next year. And they didn't want me back. They didn't want to change things. So I said, okay, then go with someone else. And then they went on to lose 25 in a row, and that was all. And I went on to win 25 in a row in a Super Bowl. So I guess I was right. Anyway, so enough of that. Enough about me. I don't want to pull a Toby Keith here. Let's not talk about me anymore. All right. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't see them winning on Sunday. I can see them being competitive, but I don't see it. They'll be more competitive on offense, but the way this defense is playing right now, no chance. You're watching / listening to the New England Football Show presented by Mortgage Right. I'm your host, John Serenitas. As always, I'm joined by the busiest man in the football universe. Seems like he covers everything. Patriots, BC, high school, college, you name it, he covers it. Kevin Stone. Just a reminder that if you are looking to sell your current home and purchase your next home, or purchase your first home, or you're looking to refinance, well, then give our guy Herb Devine a call, 781-254-2846. You can also shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. With over 27 years of experience in the lending and loan officer industry, he has the experience that you need to make your next purchase. You can also reach out to him at nights and weekends. So again, give him a call at 781-254-2846 or shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. He and his team are available anytime, any day, anytime, any day. You name it, they're available. Anyway, there we go. I think I lost my train of thought there for a sec, so then I had to reiterate that they're available.
It's usually nights and weekends, isn't it?
It's usually nights and weekends. I didn't say nights and weekends.
No.
I left that part out. Well, they're available nights and weekends, so reach out to Herb. Herb always has his phone on him. I'm pretty sure if I wanted to text Herb at 3 a.m. just to say hi, he'd be up. He's probably up watching film or tossing and turning because they have a pretty good game that week, or his kids are keeping him up. But I'm pretty sure Herb literally is available anytime you want. I joked about this with him a couple of weeks ago when I had him on. We did a sponsor special, and I said, what if somebody texts you or calls you during a game? He goes, I'll get back to him at halftime or after the game, depending on when the call comes in. So
it's a good businessman.
Well, and listen, if you know Herb, he's not just a great football coach. He's a great human being. He's just salt of the earth, one of the best people you'll meet in this business. And as somebody's been in the football business for a long time and been in the real estate business for the last few years, you come across some people that can be rough around the edges and tough to deal with. Herb, and I'm not saying it because Mortgage Right sponsors us. It's a fact. Ask anybody that knows the guy. They'll tell you the same thing. All right, BC. Lots to unpack there, but we don't have a ton of time here. We got about 20 minutes left, 15, 20 minutes left here. But that was rough on Thursday night. And I think for me, my biggest takeaway, Kevin, was how do you play that bad in the first half coming off a bye? It was nice that they had that little surge in the third quarter, but then they fell apart, ended up losing. That's a bad loss for this program. I know it's tough to win down in Blacksburg, and I know Virginia Tech is a good program, but Virginia Tech is not what they used to be. That's not a knock on that coaching staff and Coach Prime, but I think at the end of the day, this was a winnable game coming off a bye, and the Eagles laid an egg for the second straight week on the road. Virginia has not been kind to them.
The biggest problem is all of their losses have followed the same pattern. They haven't ran the ball, haven't been able to stop the run, Virginia Tech had a single game record. Think about some of the people that have played at Virginia Tech and
Right.
had big rushing performances at Virginia Tech. And you gave up the single highest rushing performance in Hokies history on national television in prime time. It's embarrassing. It's an embarrassing loss. And this season now has 6-6, 7-5 written all over it again. And it's not necessarily me jumping off the bus. It's again, you're losing, but you're losing in the same fashion every time. And that's what's worrisome. Points before the half, huge problem. 4 straight games now, you've given up, long drives, and teams have gotten momentum going into the break. Turnovers. I will continue to say this. I don't believe Tommy Castellanos is the guy. I believe he is a guy. I think he's extremely talented. But I also believe he is a runner who happens to be playing quarterback. Now, I keep saying this as well. It's only his second full season playing Division I football. People forget that. Last year was his first real year. So there's still time there. But when you have Bill O'Brien and Will Walling as coaches, how can you not expect him to be a better passer and decision maker than he's been? So I still think, and you said this in August, that Grayson James is a better fit for the offense. That will never happen. I understand that. And I do think part of it is because Castellanos was loyal, didn't hop in the portal when kind of crap hit the fan before Bill O'Brien got hired. But he's not their problem right now. It's the run defense.
Yeah.
It's the injuries.
He can make better decisions in the passing game, but to your point, he's not their problem.
No, you're going to, if you keep losing games, he won't be the reason why. Put it that way. I do think there's an air of, I think the players might know that he's not that guy that can elevate them or get you to another level. At least it feels that way to me. But it's the defense. That's the issue. I was high on Tim Lewis. You were high on Tim Lewis. The country was high on Tim Lewis for 4 weeks. And now their defense can't stop a nosebleed, particularly the running game. And they're not tackling well. Now, the injuries are a huge problem. You just lost Cam Arnold. He was in a sling today at practice, so presumably he's out for a while. You don't have Amari Jackson for the rest of the year. You don't have Bryce Steele. You don't have Jalen Blackwell. So your linebackers right now are Davion Crouch and Owen McGowan. We love Owen McGowan, but there's a ton on his plate now. And I'm just not sure he's ready to make that jump yet. So their run defense it's probably going to be an issue going forward. Their schedule does not get any easier. And I don't think the play calling has been great. Having said all that, you win Friday night, your season's back on. 8 wins is still on the table. And things are not fine, but okay. But if you drop to 4-4 at home on Friday night, this could get very ugly again.
Here we go. Nothing beats hyperbolic Kevin Stone.
Am I wrong though? Like
very
if they
lose,
if they lose Friday night, 6-6,
you'd be a great screenwriter.
I think
that's your true calling.
It pays a lot better than what I'm making right now. But no, I don't expect a great crowd on Friday night now because of these 2 losses. Yeah. I think the shine's off a little bit. So this is a big spot. Yeah. So this is a big spot, not only in terms of stopping a 2-game losing streak and sort of getting everything right within the walls of alumni, but their schedule does not get any easier. You still have to go to SMU. You still have Pitt, who's having a crazy good season right now. You still have Syracuse. You still have North Carolina. So not making a bowl is also on the table if you lose this game Friday night.
And Louisville will be tough. I mean, they went toe-to-toe with Miami on Saturday at home. Miami ended up winning, but they went toe-to-toe with them. And that's a really good skill group. Jeff Brom is a terrific coach, Louisville guy. They recruit well. Their defense has been very inconsistent, but they can score points. So it's not, especially with the injuries on defense, losing Amari Jackson is huge for this team now. Because any team that has any kind of a semblance of a number 1 receiver is going to give you problems. And that's not a knock on the guys that are left over. That's a reality. You're dipping into your reserves now, if you will. And that's a problem. I mean, we felt that defensively, this team had a pretty good first layer. This is now going to put more pressure on your pass rushers, as Araku and Akpala need to be better. You mentioned the linebacker situation. You can survive that because you can get into your sub packages depending on personnel and play with somebody like Riz Holland. He could be more of a big nickel backer type. But yeah, you play more three safety stuff. But I think at the end of the day, the injuries are starting to catch up to him. And if the offense doesn't start to carry this team, yeah, you're right. They're not only are they not going to win enough games to be bowl eligible, but this season could turn around on them pretty quick. Same can be said for UConn, coming off a tough 23-20 loss to Wake Forest. One of the things with this UConn team the last few weeks is their bread and butter is running the football. They haven't been able to do it. Wake Forest did a tremendous job shutting down that running game against one of the better offensive lines in the Northeast. UConn only ran for 45 yards on Saturday. That's not who they've been under Jim Mora. They are committed to the running game. They're going to run the football. They're going to reestablish the line of scrimmage, and they're going to get downhill and get on people. They haven't been able to do it. Nick Evers played his best game as a Husky, 26 of 43 for 264 and 2 touchdown passes. But a disappointing performance nonetheless for a UConn team that we said coming into the 6-game homestand needed to either win 5, and they still can. They got Rice and Georgia State left, but needed to win a minimum of 5, but it would have been nice if they swept. Wake Forest is down this year, but they couldn't capitalize.
Yeah, I think we both said, 4-2 bare minimum during that 6-game stretch. But after the way it started, you started thinking they run the table there, right? So,
well, that's what I'm saying. You're right. I think in the beginning, we're like, if they can win 4 of 6 here, they'll be in a pretty good spot to be bowl eligible. But the way they were playing there, you're like, they should win all of these. Wake Forest is down. It's a disappointing loss.
Yeah, but at the very least, you hung tough with an ACC opponent. I know Jim Moore is not a moral victory guy. Most football coaches aren't, but given where they are in their rebuild still, you can afford one of these. You know what I mean? So now, if you let it spiral and you lose to Rice and then you lose to Georgia State, well, now we got a problem. But it is what it is, sort of thing. That's where I'm at with that loss. It's not a season ender by any means. But I do think a big bounce back against Rice was sort of affirm what we thought about this team and that, Jim Moore is heading in the right direction.
Yeah, if you ask me my opinion on Saturday, I think UConn's going to come out flying. I think Rice is cooked. All right.
Go ahead.
You were at Holy Cross, Harvard. What a game that was. We had Dartmouth, Yale last week. Holy Cross, Harvard this week. You got to witness a great one.
Yeah, you had Harvard Brown 3 weeks ago. We say it every week, and this wasn't just an Ivy League game, but the Ivy League is freaking crazy, man. It's on a literally weekly basis. You never know what you're going to see. I'm big on hyperbole. Might be the best game I've ever covered, though. Just given the finish, the way it all played out. Harvard goes up 27-7 late in the third. 2 minutes to go in the third. The game's over. Holy Cross gets a couple stops, couple breaks here and there. Suddenly, Jaden Clairvaux from Everett, I believe, I don't want to mess that up, has a huge day. Has a go-ahead touchdown. Makes it 28-21 with, I think, 1:43 left on the clock. Harvard goes down immediately and scores. Jaden Craig with another great performance. I think he's the best quarterback in the Ivy League and probably should get some consideration for one of the best in all of FCS. His arm, especially deep, it's crazy arm talent. But they go down and make it 28-28. Take the lead. Take it back 35-28. Holy Cross has 2 Hail Mary opportunities in the final seconds. First one right in front of me looked complete. Called incomplete. Second left. They do complete a pass to Jacob Peterson. Dan Curran then goes for 2. Questionably, might have gotten PI on the 2-point conversion, but the ball was a little bit behind. It's incomplete, and Harvard steals, or survives, I should say, 35-34. Unbelievable finish. Great atmosphere. Those 2 teams have been playing since 1904, and I wrote this in the game story. I'm assuming I didn't go back through every game. You'd be hard pressed to find a better one between those two schools. And one of the games of the year, huge win for Harvard. And look, Holy Cross is very much their playoff hopes are very much still alive. It's a non-conference game, and the Patriot League is wide open. So you hope that they learn and take stuff from that game, especially a 20-point comeback in a little over 17 minutes. You can hang your hat on that. So yeah, fantastic game, great atmosphere, and I think both teams will use that game going forward as a springboard.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think so. Especially Holy Cross, they still have a shot at winning the Patriot League. Of course, the other big result over the weekend was Rhode Island going up to UNH and beating the Wildcats 26-9, and they finally won in Durham. It had been a long time for URI. Jim Fleming has got this program rolling right now, 6-1. Big win for the Rams. They got a big game coming up on Saturday when they host Maine. Maine is 4-3, coming off a huge win. An era-defining win for Jordan Stevens, easily the biggest win of his Maine tenure. They whack Villanova, who came into the game 5-1, 35-7. Should be a great game. But this URI program, and what can you say? I mean, look, one thing you can say about UNH in recent years, they've been really tough at home. They're a much different team offensively at home. They score a lot of points. They put a lot of pressure on defenses. That URI defense played unbelievable. And URI on offense isn't going to rewrite any record books here, but they just play fundamentally sound offensive football. They run the football, play action pass, dual threat quarterback. They get about as much as you can get out of Devin Farrell, both as a passer and a runner. I mean, what a season they're having. Hat tip to Jim Fleming and his staff.
Yeah, team of destiny type vibes, right? Like they're finding ways to win late. You just beat a team on the road that you haven't gotten a win against on the road since 1995. They're undefeated in FCS play and 16th in the country now. It's one of those things where you can't slip up this week, but we also have to give credit where credit's due to Maine because, like you said, that's the biggest win they've had in a long time. Biggest ranked win since 2018. So 4-3, and I think it's safe to say the turnaround is complete. Now it's about ascending for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Last couple of years they've lost a game in this 2 or 3 week stretch in October that ended up costing them the CAA and a possible at-large playoff berth. They seemingly have gotten over that hump. They got to win on Saturday, but I think if they can do that, the rest of their schedule sets up where, if nothing else, they can get an at-large playoff berth, which I think would be huge for that program. I mean, Jim Fleming and his staff can't say enough about the job they've done. Pat Murphy, an offensive coordinator, Coach Laurenti running the defense. Like, it's not easy to go up there and beat UNH. We know how good a coach Ricky Santos and that staff are. To go up there and slow down that offense the way they did, I think it's huge. All right, high school football. I had a bunch of big games this weekend, of course. On Saturday, we covered one of the biggest games in the region. You had New Canaan and Staples. New Canaan beating Staples at home. Our Craig Boland was there for that one. You've got a bunch of big games this weekend, both in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. Massachusetts, the slate is crazy. Of course, the big one this week is St. John's Prep at Catholic Memorial. You also have Weymouth at Needham, Wellesley at Natick. You have a traditional Hockomock League rivalry where you have Mansfield at North Attleboro. You also have King Philip at Milford. And then I love the interstate matchups. And we're going to be covering both of these games this weekend. You got LaSalle Academy traveling to Barnstable. We'll be covering that one on Friday night. And, of course, you have Bishop Hendricken traveling to Connecticut to take on Fairfield Prep this weekend. We'll be covering that one as well. Our Craig Boland is going to be there for that one. It's just a great weekend of high school football, and it's a big weekend in terms of the big picture here. I think a lot of league titles could potentially be claimed this weekend, but also playoff seeding here. This is a big weekend. That St. John's Prep CM game is huge.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's sort of the main event of the weekend, but it's crazy. There's only 2 weeks left in the regular season. I have to mention Reading. I have to mention Reading and Winchester real quick. Another crazy finish on Friday night, sort of a prelude to what I'd see on Saturday. But Winchester takes a 28-21 lead late in the game. Reading comes back, scores on a deep ball 3 plays later. goes for 2. Jack Murphy with a great sort of heads-up play with just a sort of a flip on the run to Devon Bursey. Sorry, Devon Bursey. I had to think of his name for a minute. The running back. They get the 2-point conversion. Winchester misses a game-winning field goal. Wait, just a fantastic high school football game. But Jack Murphy, we covered James Murphy a few years ago. He might be as good, if not better, than he was. That running team is legit. They're 6-0. They're going to be a problem again this season, but you're right. This weekend and next.
They're the one team, we need to start talking about them more in D3. They're forgotten.
Yeah,
Everybody focuses on North and Bill Ricka and Milford and Mansfield, but they're the one team that I think we need to start legitimately talking about because they could end up being the best team in D3. And one thing we know about Reading football through the years, they play well in the playoffs and they have a propensity for getting to Gillette. John Fiore's a terrific coach. Look, I say it all the time. When it comes to winning, Reading is fundamental. So there you go.
I got nothing. We're good.
It took you a second, though, to get it. It did.
It did.
All right, listen, final thoughts here before we wrap this one up. I've got about 30 seconds to enter my second and final fantasy NBA draft. I've got the 5th pick. Last night I had the 4th pick. I took Antetokounmpo. I'm hoping he stays put. He's their 5th-ranked player. I'd like to take my fellow Greek again with my first pick. But any final thoughts?
Nothing like some good Milwaukee Bucks talk to end the show. But
my second favorite team behind the Celtics. Remember, I was born in Milwaukee.
I know. No, same messages every week. Any support you can give us, please do. Whether it's a hat or T-shirt on the site, subscription on the site. This is the fun time of year. Again, the high school season, playoffs start in 3 weeks. College season, you have some potential playoff teams and the Ivy League race in BC and UConn coming down to the final month. So this is where it gets good for us, and nobody does what we do.
Yeah, no, I agree. Nobody does what we do, and like Kevin said, feel free to subscribe. Again, go to anyfootballjournal.com. Go to the subscription tab. We appreciate it. For $2.99 a month, you get some of the best high school, college, and Patriots coverage in the area. So we really do appreciate your business. Feel free to get a subscription or, as Kevin said, a hat, a T-shirt, whatever. Any support you can give us greatly helps us. It allows us to build this business and continue to provide the content that you're looking for. We are content creators, after all. All right, that'll do it for this episode of the New England Football Show. For Kevin Stone, I'm John Saranitas. Till next week, peace.
See ya.